We are following some breaking news this hour, a truly remarkable report out of the New York Times about the extent to which Israel was warned about Hamas's intentions to start a war ahead of the deadly October 7th attacks. Quote, Israeli officials obtained Hamas's battle plan for the October 7th terrorist attack more than a year before it happened, documents, emails, and interviews show. But Israeli military and intelligence officials dismissed the plan as aspirational, considering it too difficult for Hamas to carry out. The approximately 40-page document, which the Israeli authorities codenamed Jericho Wall, outlined point by point exactly the kind of devastating invasion that led to the deaths of about 1,200 people. According to one intelligence analyst in Israel, this was not merely a plan for an attack. Quote, it is a plan designed to start a war. Ben Rhodes served as Deputy National Security Advisor to President Barack Obama, and he joins me now. Ben, this just published before we went to air, so I just want to sort of set the table for folks. I mean, it's not just that there's a battle plan. It is the battle plan. It involves things like paragliders going over the fence. It involves machine guns and drones to take out security cameras. It involves initiating with a barrage of rockets, motorcycles going over the fence. I mean, it's literally the plan. And they had it inside the Israeli intelligence apparatus. What's your, as someone who works in the United States and security apparatus, what is your reaction to this?
I mean, it's absolutely astonishing, Chris, because to your point, sometimes you have warning that something might happen, but very rarely, if ever, do you have this level of specificity. I mean, before I was in the Obama administration, I worked for the vice chair of the 9/11 Commission on the 9/11 Commission. And this would be analogous to the U.S. government having had information that, you know, al-Qaeda was planning to try to fly planes into these targets from these airports and had people in flight schools. I mean, this is a level of specificity that intelligence almost never gets. And that's what is so astonishing about this reporting. It wasn't just like a concern that Hamas might be up to something, they might be trying to plan something big. You usually get those types of warnings, you know, reflections in conversations or intercepted communications. This was the literal plan of what they actually ended up doing on October 7th within the Israeli system for a full year. That is something, that is an intelligence and policy failure that goes beyond anything that I can think of, frankly.
Yeah, I was trying to search for some analog or precedent and was coming up empty as well. Then there's another additional aspect to this that in some ways is even more damning, which is that at least one analyst in a unit in the Israeli intelligence system basically watched or saw that there was a rehearsal about 6 weeks before the attack, and once again basically went to a superior and said, it looks like they're rehearsing the plan from that we have, Jericho Wall, and was again, again, according to the reporting we have in the New York Times, encrypted emails they've obtained, basically told, don't worry about it.
Yeah, so seeing the rehearsal, and the thing to bear in mind, Chris, and we don't know yet how far up, I mean, there are questions that remain. The questions that I would have are, was this plan briefed to Prime Minister Netanyahu or people who are government ministers? How high up did this go in the system? I'd be surprised, it'd be weird if something of this scale wasn't, but that'd be its own version of a failure. Right. The thing that people have to bear in mind here is that not only was there not an action taken to disrupt this, but in fact, on October 7th, what had happened is the IDF that would normally be at that border had been redirected up to the West Bank because they were busy protecting settlers, Israeli settlers who were engaging, often initiating clashes with Palestinians. So actually the border wasn't even at the normal status quo of security, it was less. And that's the policy failure, to redirect those resources up to the West Bank. You would think that if you had this kind of planning and you were seeing this kind of activity by Hamas, we have reporting of additional warnings from Egypt and other places about this potentially. So you would think that you would be trying to do everything you could to fortify that border and at least hedge against the fact that this plan might go forward, if not try to actively disrupt it. None of that happened.
Yeah, you know, we've sort of, as we've sort of dealt with the aftermath of October 7th, and I think as Americans tried to sort of figure out, you know, a way to understand it, and 9/11 has stood out, right, as a sort of touchstone or sort of an American domestic experience. And one of the ways that the reaction in the politics of Israel has been different in the U.S. is that there's been a huge rallying around the IDF and the war effort among Israeli politics and in public opinion, but not around Benjamin Netanyahu, who has incredibly low approval ratings, who in the most recent polling I saw today was only drawing 23 or 24% of the vote. And you really got to wonder what this does to an already extremely tenuous political position in a situation in which Netanyahu, it is understood, is going to face the music when the war ends, but also has every political incentive imaginable to extend the war as far as possible, precisely because of this consensus view held across the ideological spectrum in Israel that he will face the music when the war ends.
No, that's right, Chris. I mean, Netanyahu had been a political survivor for a long time. He'd become less popular because of corruption investigations, certainly because of the kind of judicial coup that he was engaged in. There were huge street protests, remember, against Netanyahu before October 7th. The one thing he had is that his nickname, his self-given nickname, was "I'm Mr. Security." You know, you may not like certain things about me, you may not like some of my coalition, but I keep Israel safe. And that was shattered, obviously, on October 7th. And with each of these reports about the kind of incompetence or failure to protect that come out, that political standing suffers even more. I think, frankly, what is worrying is precisely because he's in such a weak political position, the only thing that is keeping him in office is this kind of emergency unity war cabinet that he is leading. But the problem with that, the challenge from that strategically and politically, and I think from the United States perspective is, as you said, that gives him every incentive to try to perpetuate a war, because I think everybody in Israel that I talk to, most political analysts agree that when the music stops, like, he's going to be replaced. That's just the nature of Israeli politics right now. And that's an awkward position to be in, frankly. It's an uncomfortable position to be in, particularly, you have a massive aid package working its way through the U.S. Congress. You have huge international opinion inflamed against the scale of this Israeli military operation. You obviously have the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. All these things are happening. This report comes out. He's a very politically damaged leader. And the question is, does he need to be replaced now? Can we really, can Israel afford to wait for some end of this military operation that has a kind of open-ended duration to it? Netanyahu himself has said we may have to have an open-ended administration of Gaza, which might suggest that there's not necessarily going to be a clear end date to this war from his perspective.
Yeah, that's all of that is, I think, really, really well said, and one of the main sort of contextual issues here. Just to go back to your experience, and one of the things I thought about this again, I think from the first moment that the reports started to come in of the scale of this attack, right? And how kind of, famous in many ways the Israeli intelligence and security apparatus is. It's one of the most sophisticated in the entire world. It's known as such. This question of, like, how did this happen has been there from the first day. And I've also wondered, like, will there be some 9/11 commission, right? Is there going to be some? And this it just seems you have to do. I mean, there's a lot of questions raised by this, like, how far up did it go? Who's this colonel who said no? Why did people think they weren't going to do it? How far did they circulate the reports that they were rehearsing, et cetera?
No, that's right. I mean, Chris, my immediate reaction right on October 7th is, how could this have happened? Because just to give you one example, Israel controls the entire internet and telecommunications infrastructure in Gaza. So sure, Hamas can try to communicate offline, but the idea that you could plan something of this sophistication without it interacting with the telecommunications network that Israel has visibility in, I just didn't get that. And part of what we're seeing now is actually they did have this information. And to your point, I think in Israel what they've said is, well, there'll have to be a commission of inquiry. There'll have to be some look back at this. But again, like what politicians do, I think Netanyahu's approach has been, that's for after the war. We have to wait until after the war to look back. We have to be focused on what we're doing in Gaza now. The problem with that is Israelis need to have confidence in their political leadership, in their military leadership, in their intelligence community, the people that are carrying out the war, the people that are making hugely consequential decisions. And I don't know how you can have that confidence when there's reporting like this. This
has always been an issue in just understanding the sort of, the at the kind of ground level, the tactical response from Israel, which was from one day to the next, you go from totally blind, apparently, right, to this horrific attack, the most brutal and catastrophic in the country's history, I think, in many ways, though they've suffered many attacks in Israel. to prosecuting a war that's going to depend on some intelligence, a lot of intelligence. Where are targets? Where are things? So it's all the same apparatus. It's the same folks. It's the same units. It's the same colonels. It's all the same thing. And so, yeah, that question of how much faith people can have, and particularly the Biden administration, the U.S. government, as it prepares this aid package, I think only gets more acute after this remarkable bombshell reporting from the New York Times published tonight. Ben Rhodes, always good to have you, sir. Thank you very much. Still ahead, Donald Trump is gagged once more. What the latest ruling means for Trump, and will he be able to follow the rules for once? Next.